Hey guys, Scott here again with our latest beer video for you. I'm going to spare you all my little intro. Those of you who don't know me very well, you can put a little comment. I can always explain where I'm drawing my history. Some of you have heard it too many times that I've been watching my videos. If you haven't and you're interested, where I'm coming from, let me know. One thing I will address, I had a question about why Scott's Rathskeller is my YouTube page. I don't know. I just sound like a kitschy name. I grew up in New Jersey, and there was a bar in Trenton, the old Trenton State College, which is now the University of New Jersey. It was a Rathskeller, and those of you who don't know, I believe in German, it's like a room in someone's house that they drink in the dark room. So I just figured I try to keep this all very casual. I do have sometimes some bullet points I look at just to make sure I have, some organization with these videos, even though I try to keep them very light and casual. But I just figured just a casual place, you and I, we can, talk about a beer, drink a beer at times. And by all means, open a beer if you're ever watching this for the 15, 20 minutes and start enjoying it. If you want to watch this at a later time, drink it. So, through my studies with the Cicerone, the beer history has been one of the things that has really latched on to me, over the years. And we are going to be talking about American Light Lager. And, before you turn this off and see Budweiser, you're like, oh man, I don't want to, hear about that style of beer. American Lager is actually, a well-researched type of history and beer history. And I actually find it very interesting. Even though, I'm not necessarily going to throw all my craft beers out of my refrigerator and start drinking Budweiser exclusively. If that's what your thing, by all means do it. But I do appreciate not just the history, but also how they can brew this beer almost consistently every single time. And as a home brewer, sometimes I could brew a stout or a porter or a brown ale and use the same ingredients and, try to keep it to the same temperatures, and it's always slightly different. So what we're going to be talking about is American Lager. And when I talk about American Lager, we're also going to, think of American Light Lager. So your Budweisers or your Bud Lights, your Millers or your Miller Lights. And they're all basically, they're not going to have much emphasis in a lot of malt flavor and a lot of hop flavor and aroma. They're going to be very easy drinking type of beers. The really big difference between the American Lager and the American Light Lager is alcoholic strength. So American Lager is about 4.2 to 5.3 for style percent. Again, I used to have this all memorized, and some of that number I had memorized. And I think with the Light Lager, if I remember correctly, it's 2.8 to 4.2. So that'd be like your Miller Lights, your Bud Lights. They're all hopped the same. And I will try to address things when I crack open a can here about aroma. But, the American Lager is meant to be kind of an easy drinking, highly carbonated, refreshing type of drink. A beer that you're not thinking about much. Like, if you follow me on Facebook, I put a lot of thought in some of my beers. Take the aroma in, I write notes, I put things. Sometimes you just want to drink the beer and you don't want, and you may do that with every beer, but like sometimes you want to take it in. These American Light Lagers, I do have an appreciation for them, but they're just to consume, maybe sometimes in volume. The term quaffable or crushable, this is that style of beer, whether you're drinking, the American Light Lager, the International Pale Lager like a Heineken, or this isn't, again, an authentic German, but a 6 points version of German Pilsner. And again, I'll try to remember to talk the subtle differences between the three of them. Usually as you go from the American Light Lager up through more traditional German lagers or Czech Premium Pale Lager, which you may see Pilsner Urquell. They have a little bit more malt flavor profile, more hop aroma flavor. Alcoholic strength may still be about the same. So, and they use less other ingredients. But let me stop there and just kind of get into the history of the American Lager. Now, American beer drinking in general, or beer, really starts in colonial times, when they came over, and we were drinking ales mainly. If you want to go back into the 1700s, even when the Mayflower came over, and they, I think it was John Smith, they had beer on the ships and stuff. There were ales. Now, ales, I haven't done a video on this for those who are not as familiar, but there's beer. If you had a family tree, beer is the top of the family tree, grandma and grandpa up there. Then you have ales and lagers. And the big difference is what yeast is being used, at least this day and age. Okay, back then it may have been differently. And they're usually fermented at a little higher temperatures, ales. we call them top fermenting yeast. There's more esters and phenolic quality. Lagers are brewed usually a little more colder temperatures, and they're more crisper. So without me diving down that wormhole too much, but ales were primarily the beer of the time in the early colonial times. Well, around the 1830s, we had a lot of German immigration, okay? And they were coming over here to the United States, especially in the Midwest. You want to think of Wisconsin, Missouri, Kansas, and they were bringing their lager beers, right? Which lagering means two things. Besides the yeast, it's also, cold storage. It helps drop the, yeast, makes the beer, crystal clear, very simple flavors. So they brought their lager beers over here, and their recipes and things like that. The other, thing that they ran into a couple of pitfalls. One is the latitude of that region of the United States was a few hundred miles, or I think it's 100 to 300 miles south of Germany. So Germany, they were able to cold storage things and produce certain beers and not spoil it. The United States, refrigeration was not, invented at the time, and so they were still having a hard time with the beers. The other problem the Germans found when they came over here to brew is they were using a lot of what they call two-row malt. And I won't go into the big differences, but there was two-row. In the United States, we had a lot of six-row malt. And it's still barley, and it still can produce, the thick, creamy syrup the yeast act on. But they were finding that the barley they were using in the United States at the time was producing a very cloudy beer because the six-row barley has a lot more protein to it. And it would cloud the beer up a lot. And then without the refrigeration, help drop some of those particulates and things like that. And the other thing too is it spoils quicker when there's a lot more protein in the beer. So they weren't producing those clear beers. And my other video I talked about around 1820, 1830, glassware was becoming very popular. It wasn't just for the rich. And they were really, even in Germany, were really enjoying seeing their perfectly crystal clear beer. So when they came to the United States and they're using the six-row barley, they really weren't too happy about it. Well, they had decided that instead of using as much six-row, they would use a little bit, and this is where people knock some of these American lagers, some corn and rice, which if you mash corn and rice, it produces fermentable sugars like the barley, but it's a lot clearer beer. It's not as heavy a beer. It ferments out almost completely, so it's a more lighter flavored beer. So they were noticing that if they could put some corn and rice into the beer, it would produce that lighter crystal clear beer. And the other advantage was because the six-row had enzymes to break down, it helped with the conversion of corn and rice in producing the beer. If you use corn and rice now in home brewing, or even Budweiser probably uses, they do what they call a cereal mash. They got to go really high with the temperature and break it down. It doesn't mash like regular barley. But again, that's another wormhole I'm not going to go down right now. So, in the 1800s and with German immigration, they started producing this beer, and you can go through the history of Joseph Pabst in Milwaukee, and Anheuser and Augustus Busch, and the history is fascinating if you want to read up on that, way beyond what I want to do in this video today. So they were producing this beer, and it gained a lot of popularity, and it was something that they enjoyed. But then what happened is we got into the 1900s, and there was the temperance movement, which led to the 18th Amendment and Prohibition, because everyone was bad, drinking alcohol and behaving poorly. And then again, if you want to know the rest of the history, obviously when Prohibition ended in the 21st Amendment in roughly 1933, that was the end, be all end all of it. So what happened was, they started producing this beer, and again, Volstead Acts, Prohibition, things like that. We came out of Prohibition. There was roughly, I think it was like only 80-something breweries compared to, say, several hundred breweries back before Prohibition. So the beer market took a big hit. Okay, so we didn't have a lot going on there with beers and what we have these days with craft breweries. Even contrary to that, they were producing this beer. most of America had mass market food, right? They were producing, now other goods were being like highly marketed, not marketed, mass produced, you know, like from crackers to canned soup. And, you know, we remember the ads growing up, you know, or looking back in history. Well, beer was the same thing. They were just trying to produce this mass marketing type of thing, or mass production. And that's why nowadays when we make fun of beers like this, we think, oh, they did it strictly corn and rice because it was cheap. Sure, probably in the 50s and after World War II, you know, they went to corn and rice because of cost effectiveness, but it really wasn't cost effectiveness in the 1800s. Okay, it was actually probably more expensive back then. But fast forwarding back into, you know, we went through 2 wars, we were rationing barley, things like that. It became, you know, an alternative. So it did become a little more cost effective. So we come out of World War II, we have this mass marketing beer, we have this beer here, we roll into the 60s and 70s, and you got Schlitz, that's mass marketing beer. So we actually became very familiar with this style of beer. And it wasn't until, I think I mentioned in another video, around 1979 that home brewing became legalized, and then the chains came undone, and we started getting into more craft beers and getting English textbooks, and producing the craft brewing industry really took on, and we started exponentially increasing it. But so you can see in the early days and why Budweiser's the way it is, and you know, a lot of it now is if you changed it, there's a lot of loyal Budweiser drinkers or Miller drinkers and things like that, and Miller Lite, and you remember the Taste Great Less Filling commercials in Miller Lite. You know, we went through that whole commercial age early on. Well, now they have their customers that are familiar with this style of beer, and it really has its place, I think, in the beer market. And even my Heineken here, I use this for my off-flavor spikes. I've drawn some appreciation for this also. So a bit of history of, you know, why Budweiser's the way it is, or Miller, and things like that. But if you really want to do it on your own, I probably went a little longer on the history than I wanted to, but through the colonial period of ales, through lagering, and the German immigration really played a big component with that. So I'm not going to be opening all these beers, okay? I got it in front of me. I'll open up the Budweiser one because that's kind of what the focus is. But again, really going from Budweiser, or actually if you had the Bud Light to the Budweiser to international pale lager like Heineken or St. Pauli Girl or some of your Italian examples, what you're doing is you're going from a little bit more malt flavor, a little bit more hopping in each variety, more bitterness in each, and then sometimes the alcoholic strength will increase. And like I said, Budweiser is about, the style will be between 4.2 to 5.3. I think Budweiser is closer to 4.2 to 5%. The 2.8 to 4.2 is for the light version. So again, when you start getting into that, I mean, I know a lot of people are trying to like cut back on calories and things like that. Just drink what you enjoy drinking if you like this particular style of beer. Okay? So what I'm going to do is let me crack open my Budweiser here. Okay? I haven't had Budweiser in ages. I've had the Heineken because I use it again for my Cicerone studying. The glassware, believe it or not, even though I make fun of my shaker pints, okay, glass, which is not a great glass for, drink it whatever you want. You know, the shaker pint is what you're going to commonly see it at the beer store. But whatever glass you have laying around, this is my Spegler glass, which I use for a lot of my IPAs. Pint glasses, tulip pint glasses. Because you're not going to get a ton of hop flavor and aroma from this style of beer, and that's exactly what it's intended to. They don't want to overpower people. Having one that accentuates the hops is not as vital as other styles of beer. So you're playing beer pong, things like that. You know, you're using usually this style of beer. The other thing you're going to see with this when I pour it is you're not going to get that big frothy head. There's less protein in it. You're not going to have a real thick head to this. It's it's going to be very, very clear, and that's intended. So, a shaker pint is fine, or whatever glassware you like to use. So, again, if anything else comes to my head as I open this up. So let's crack this thing open. Okay, I got a big can. Since I don't drink Budweiser in any regular fashion, even though I will never turn it away, I figure I'd get a few of the bigger cans instead of just 12-pack or 24-pack of it. So let me pour this into my shaker pint. Okay. And again, it's fizzing like crazy here, but we're not gonna, it's not gonna be a very sustained head. So when we look at this, it's straw colored. Okay, I haven't done a video on. I'm gonna do a video on some of the numbers, like when you go into your craft brew store, like what numbers are. So this is like a low, what they call SRM, which is a very pale straw colored beer. You can almost see my reflection in there on the other side. Okay. Classic for the style. You see, I aggressively poured it, so we have a little bit more head. But this is gonna, if I let it sit here for a little while, that's gonna dissipate pretty quickly versus, say, the nitrogenated Guinness that I did on that video. So again, what are you gonna smell? Okay, we saw the clarity here. And this is why I think people don't like some German beers, because the hops that they use are like the German noble hops, like Tettnang, Spalt, Haltrau, Mittelfrüh. Willamette is a little bit in the Pacific Northwest. So what are you getting? You're getting, we're getting that spicy, floral, herbal type of hop. Why we get spoiled, growing up in college, and you get some of the cheaper beers, and you got used to smelling that, and you thought that a cheap beer, bad beer. It probably didn't taste very good. So you start getting into German, real genuine German Pilsners, and they use hops like that are, floral, perfumey, peppery, minty, like Saaz hops, S-A-A-Z hops. A lot of times the American consumer, I don't think, they have memories of that smell and everything. And that's why I think they knock it a little bit, and why they don't enjoy, maybe like a domestic Pilsner. Out here on Long Island, Great Point Brewery makes a nice Pilsner. But that's why Pilsner beers fall in there. Now, again, I'm not going to delve too much into different styles. But, we call this American lager because it is a lager. Sometimes they use the term Pilsner to describe this. It's not really a German Pils, okay? But no one's going to reprimand you if you happen to use that. But you may hear that term used, but they'll use similar hops, so it'll have a very similar aroma to the high quality German Pilsners that you'll see out in the market. So while I'm thinking of that, is if you are a Bud Light drinker, a Budweiser drinker, you enjoy that style of beer, which is your own entitled to it. Again, I have an appreciation for it too. Okay, I usually purchase it for people that I know that drink it. Try a German beer. Go into your brew store, pull a German beer off the shelf. That's the Warsteiner, Hofbrauhaus, which is always very common, Spaten. You may actually enjoy that, and that's can be like a little gateway to trying something. But those are going to have a little bit more hop, a little more malt flavor, more complexity. You may actually enjoy that. So if you don't get turned off by this spicy herbal floral kind of noble hop variety that you see in Budweiser or Bud Light, and you just have memories of being sick in college or something with that beer, or Coors Light, try that. You may actually enjoy it and be like, you just opened up a whole new avenue of beer, tastes. Okay, so yeah, so definitely, I'm getting that. The other thing, when you notice, while I'm thinking about it, when you open up lagers, I didn't get this. I've gotten this before. It usually dissipates pretty quickly. Lager yeast may produce a sulfur compound it's volatile, so it doesn't hang around for very long. So if you ever open up a, I'll just call it lager style beer, especially these lagers, or even the German lagers and higher quality lagers. If you ever get that sulfur, just give it a second, breathe. You'll get rid of that sulfur compound, but you'll get that. And why you have that sometimes too is there's a component called DMS, dimethyl sulfide, which gives kind of a cream corn flavor. It's an off flavor usually in beer. It's usually allowable in these styles to a certain level. But it is an off flavor. I'm not going to go into too much. It's usually on the Pilsner malt. We try to burn it off with the boiling and things like that. But if you ever get like a blast of sulfur, cream corn, dimethyl sulfur, you'll get that smell. But it should go away pretty quickly. Okay, so you can see the head is gone already on this. Okay. So when I get this. Again, I'll get that white bread like a lot of these lighter beers, that white bread, floury, doughy, kind of raw dough kind of taste of the malt profile. You know, that herbal, slightly floral component of the hops, you'll get taste. But again, the hop aroma, and I don't want to overstate the hop aroma when I'm talking about spicy, floral, you know, in this style of beer is very muted, okay? Because they want it very easy drinking and crushable. And again, it has its place in beer lifestyle of drinking beer, but it's not very subdued. If you really want to pick that up, get either a well-made domestic version of a Pilsner or the German variety, and you'll understand a little bit more Pilsner Urquell, which I'm going to do a video specifically on that beer. And you know, I suggest too is when you're at your craft brewery, instead of just jumping to the IPAs, if you see them making like either a blonde ale or a German style Pilsner, taste it. I won't mention names, you know, on the thing, but I've talked to people who get fresh malt around here, and you know who you are. They showcase their fresh malt. Some people don't even know what fresh malt and beer tastes like and smells like. And I'm not trying to be like a beer snob, but like you go and you taste these beers and then you stick your nose out like, what is that flavor? Because you're not used to smelling it or tasting it. Try to stay away from the porters and stouts sometimes. And if you're doing a flight, grab a light style beer like a Pilsner if they're making it there. And really, or sometimes German Helles, Munich Helles, is really what they showcase the Pilsner malt, because there's not a lot of hops in there. It's very sweet malt. You know, broaden your horizons with the flavor of it. So try those out. Smell the hops. Try to get that noble hop type aroma and smell, and then maybe you come back to this beer and you kind of appreciate it a little bit more, or maybe less, because you want to go back to the craft brewery, which I always encourage. I don't make it sound like I'm working for Budweiser here. Or any of the other macro breweries. Now, the making of this beer, which I kind of brushed over, even though I said it in the history, is they use 2-row malt, they use some 6-row malt, but they do still use corn and rice in this, and it's up to about 40% corn and rice for Budweiser. And again, I may be mistaken. I think Budweiser uses corn. I think Miller Coors uses rice. Could be mistaken on that. But they're using adjuncts. We call those adjuncts. Anything other than malted barley like that, we call them adjuncts. So they are using corn and rice in this. And it does give that light color. Again, not as much protein, so the head drops down a little bit more quickly. It's not that nice frothy head. And it is fermentable, so it will be very easy to drink and very light-bodied to it. So again, let me just take another sip. So again, I'm not, so Budweiser, again, that style, we call it American lager. The light versions, we call American light lager, from the BJCP, which is Brewers Judge Certification Program booklet, that has all the styles that we study for Cicerone and people that are becoming BJCP judges. And again, this, is not going to have much bitterness. I think it's like 8 to 12 IBUs, which are international bitter units. So remember, with bitterness, you want the beer to sit on your tongue, let it kind of go down your throat, wait a few seconds. You may get a little puckering. This is going to be less bitter than the German Pilsner, Czech Premium Pale Lager. More bitter though than your light versions of this beer, and less than the Heinekens of the world and the some of the Italian varieties, and or even like Corona and things like that. Which again, I won't even go down that road too much with that beer. So again, little history again, guys. Hopefully found it interesting of American beer, and specifically American lager and light lager and everything that goes with it. One last thing before we go, since it is very carbonated, it's very easy to drink. Pairing, it's one of these beers that since you're drinking volume, drink it barbecue, pizza, easy fare, things that You're not really thinking of the beer. You know, if you eat this with real heavy dishes, it'll overpower the beer. But this is not a beer, like I said, that we typically are savoring. It's one of those beers that we have just clearing our palate. Has enough carbonation to clear it, to be ready for a next bite of food. It's not some that we're like really taking in. It's one of those, the drinkability of it is very high. And again, the quaffability and crushability of it. So it's really not that important, but barbecue food, pizza, wings, things just to kind of cleanse your palate, okay? The flavor profile on this is so light that it's probably not even, you're gonna pick it up or compliment too many things. All right, so again, hopefully you enjoyed that, guys. Until next time, cheers, and I will see you then. Take care, have a great day.